born in New York, and then we moved here when I was like still a baby. And when we moved to Orlando, and after that, like I went through the normal childhood life where I went through like elementary school, middle school, and high school. But as I was going through like my education, arts kind of played a big role in what I wanted to do, because I started off as wanting to actually be a painter. And then I transitioned from actually wanting to be a painter to wanting to be a singer. And then I went to dancing. And dancing is actually what got me into filmmaking, because it was the idea of like, we used to take music and edit the music. And I was in charge of editing the music. And then I found this program that you edit music, but then I realized that you can edit film in it, which I thought was actually really interesting. Luckily, there was a school for performing arts, and there they had a film program in there. So throughout my time actually there, they had drama, which they had directing, which I learned then. I started to direct, and I was able to write, and then I was able to use that and translate it to film. So I was lucky because I was actually able to take kind of what I learned and the discipline I learned throughout all of the arts facets for like singing and dancing, acting, and painting, because all of those still have one thing in common. They all involve like, you need discipline, you need patience, you need to understand that not like how people interpret things differently. I used to do these short films when I was a kid and in middle school. My sister had these digital cameras, and every time I would just take it from her, and I would this is when I was editing music more for like our dance recitals, and I would take all my friends, like the dance friends, and I'm like, oh, I want to shoot these things with them, and I would put them together. And I remember I had my dance professor at the time, who we were graduating, and we were trying to figure out what we can give her as a gift. So I wanted to do this like slideshow video for her, kind of saying like thank you for everything. And I did it, and when I I remember I was so into it. Like, I stayed up so late every night working on it, getting all the clips, getting all the pictures together, and then putting it together. And then it was actually, we presented it on this big screen at our performance. And I remember a lot of people came up to me afterwards and was like congratulating me and told me the video looked good. And I kind of had a sense of pride in that. And I'm like, I want to make money kind of doing this. And it's like, I always believe, I was, even growing up, I'm like, I always wanted to do something that made me happy. And for the longest time, I thought it was going to be teaching. I thought it was going to be I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. I thought I was going to be a doctor at one point. I went through the whole line of what I wanted to be. But film was the only thing that was like, if I had to do it for free, I would do it for free. I was looking into many universities, like NYU and UCLA. And then I really wanted to go to FSU, because FSU, again, had one of the top film programs, and it was lucky enough that it was not too far from home. But when I was looking into it, I noticed something different. Not only did they have their production school where you kind of learned how to do on-set stuff and work, but they also had this new program that just was starting that was part of their animation and digital arts program. And it was more to teach you the visual effects side as well as animation. It was kind of like an introductory program, I felt, for it. And they were located in West Palm Beach, and they had this whole tie-in with a major studio called Digital Domain at the time. So that kind of actually really drew me in. So I applied for the school. I was very fortunate I got into it. I went through that whole process, and the whole process was, to this day, I think, the most stressful point of my, stressful time of my life. I always say, compared to what I do now, what I do now in the real world, in the real world industry is like a walk in the park compared to what I went through in film school. Well, mainly because they hold you to such a high level there, and they want you to be professionals. All your teachers, all my professors were people who worked in the industry, who were at one time either directors, producers, animators, lighters, compositors, that they actually did this for a living, and they expected the best from you. And if you came in there and you showed crap work, they would call you out on that. You weren't able to just be like, oh, let me just put something together and put it out there. And and they would be fine with it. They weren't. So I always found myself like, especially as somebody who like I'm a big perfectionist. I always saw myself always in the editing labs late, or the like working just like overnight, like not like half the time not sleeping, just trying to put something together. Because at the end of the day, it's your name that you're putting out there. I did focus really on producing. I produced several films throughout my whole time there. And with that, I became really close with one of our producing professors who taught us like kind of the production management side of film, like contracts, insurance, bidding, scheduling, crewing, casting, like when you're putting together a film, like from the bottom up. And that's something I really loved. I love actually the actual management side of film, of, you know what, I get a script, I read a script, I see what it needs to get done to get the script, to get this from the script to the screen. I see how much it's going to cost. I go into, I'm working with the director, I'm working with the production designer, I'm trying to get their visions together and align, I'm trying to find locations, I'm trying to find actors. Okay, so that same professor who was our production management teacher, he saw something in a few of us that he kind of liked and that he kind of saw in himself. So he put together a small group of us that were in the class, and he trained us to really focus in on producing. And he was actually the one who got me my first interview, where I was interviewing for a place called Pixelmondo that was out in LA. And they're known for doing like Game of Thrones, a lot of TV work, a lot of film work, and now they're doing a lot of previs work. So I actually had the interview before I graduated college. And I was lucky enough that both me and another friend of mine, we both applied for the same job, and we both got a job as a junior coordinator out in LA. So it was like right after graduating, I like not even like a week later, I was on a plane with my parents, and we like flew to LA and like had to get an apartment and all that ready right before I started that following Monday. After a year there, I wanted something different. The studio was a big studio, but also that Pixelmondo was very contained in LA. And what I really wanted to do was I wanted to work more in television. So I started kind of applying to other places, and my dream job was actually to work for Nickelodeon. So I started applying I applied for Nickelodeon. I actually got interviewed with them and actually got a job offer from them. But I was actually out of town one day, and I got a call from my supervisor, who was from Pixelmondo, and he was telling me, he's like, hey, I'm just letting you know, I put my 2 weeks in. I'm going to Lucasfilm. I want you to come with me. And at the time, I'm like, okay, like, I don't think that's going to be that easy. I don't think it's going to be that, like, quick for me to just kind of go, just, like, apply and get in, because everybody wants to work for Lucasfilm and ILM. ILM and Lucasfilm are, like, the number one in the country for visual effects. In the United States, they are one of the best visual effects industry. They're the leading in the visual effects industry.
We have to rephrase that. I mean, they are the best in the world. Come on.
Yes, in my opinion, they are like, yes, the best, one of the best in, like, they're leading in general. Stuff that they do there is revolutionary.
Exactly.
People since they're kids want to work on Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones. They want to work on these films, and the gravitas of what it is and what the company holds, and the legacy of George Lucas, and now Disney owns it. It's kind of like, it's a big company. So I just just saying one day, okay, I'm gonna apply, like, whatever. I didn't think I was gonna get it, but on that following Monday, I applied. I got a call the next day saying that they wanted to give me an interview. I interviewed that next day on a Wednesday. Then I had my second interview on Thursday, and they offered me the job right 30 minutes after my interview.
That's amazing.
So I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. I remember I called my mom right away. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is all happening really fast. They wanted me to start right away. And I was like, I can't believe it. It didn't hit me that I just got a job with Lucasfilm, with ILM, and it didn't hit me at that moment. And even until I even moved there and got there and started working there, I was just like, what am I doing here? like, like I just graduated a year ago. People who I graduated with was still looking for a job, and yet I just went from one like fairly like decent visual effects studio to like the VFX studio that everyone wants to work at. When I started, they told me they interviewed me, because I was interviewing at the time they had 3 different films going on, and 3 different films that they were interviewing for, but the job that they put me onto was for King Kong, the Kong Skull Island. That's what I mean. And they told me right away, they're like, this film is going to go really fast. It's going to deliver in a few months. Like, you're going to be thrown in there. Like, they're going to throw you into the pool. It's either going to be sink or swim. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm up for the challenge. So literally, I moved to I remember, when I moved to San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco the day before my first day, and I moved in, and I went to the first day of orientation. They're showing me around, and then I get introduced to my team, and they're like, here's your departments. These are what you're going to be looking over. This is what you're going to be doing. And at the time, I was just I was very overwhelmed, because I was just they expect a lot from you, and they my first studio kind of they didn't give me that much responsibility. With this studio is here, no, you're in charge of scheduling your own people. You're in charge of telling us how many more artists do you need. You need to tell us what your schedule looks like. You're the one in charge of making sure your stuff gets done. It's not like somebody was babying me or watching me do it. I was now kind of in charge of at that time 2 different departments, and at the time it was I was oh my god. And since we were so busy, there was not really a time where somebody was able to sit down with me and go over with me hey, this is how we do stuff here. It was more I had to stay. I always came in an hour to 2 hours before everyone else did, and I stayed about an hour to 2 after everyone left, and I came on the weekends just to get caught up on where everything was, learning the tools they use, learning the process of their pipeline, learning just in general how ILM and Lucasfilm worked. King Kong itself is known. It's one of the oldest stories in the visual effects world, and we're recreating it. It was a lot. But when they put me on the film, they're you're going to be doing what we call creature. And creature involves all the anything that involves fur, anything that involves muscles. So pretty much King Kong. So I was in charge of any time you saw King Kong on the screen, that had to go through my department, because they were the ones in charge of his look, his fur, how his muscles jiggled, how they moved, how the gums in his mouth when he opened it, how they how that worked, how his nose flared, all the emotion, the small wrinkles, and when he would do stuff, they were working on his their muscle sims. And then the other department was I was doing was what we call model correction, or MCore, which is pretty much enhancing the creature sim, so giving him more muscle definition in every shot. But you have to go through every shot, and it's very meticulous.
So you were in charge of both departments?
What was that?
Were you in charge of both departments?
I was in charge of, yes, I was the production person coordinator in charge of those departments, along with stereo, which stereo is the 3D conversion. So when you go to a movie theater and you see it in 3D, that was also what I was responsible for. So at the end of the film, when everything was getting done, I had to then go through a third party and kind of get all the stereo, all that stuff done, so the film was converted to 3D.
Okay, so okay,
mm-hmm.
That's a lot of work.
Oh no, it was, and they told me that I was going to be doing all this on my first day. I was I got very nervous, because I was I've never really managed this, and I had a huge crew I had a big crew at the time, more than any size crew I dealt with at that time. There was over 600 shots in the film, and kind of just it was just a lot, because I had to not only learn kind of what the process was, but also what these departments did. And I worked with my supervisors, because I had supervisors who I worked with when it came to like, who do we give this work to? Who can handle this? Like, what do they like? How long is it going to take to get it done? So, because at the end of the day, it's going to be me and them working together to kind of get it out in front of the main supervisor, the VFX supervisor, who has to give it a thumbs up before we send it to the client. So yeah, my first, after Kong was done, I hopped onto Thor Ragnarok that just came out, and that was when I took over I was covering the departments for animation, layout, lighting, and comp. So comp is pretty much at the end when you put everything together. And so it's like, that's kind of like the holy grail position that everyone always kind of wants, because you are kind of in charge at that point of making sure everything gets done.
So you're practically putting the movie together in terms of visual effects, right?
Yeah, the comp team, what they do is like they take all the pieces and they put it together, and then they're the last thing you do before you ship it out.
You were in charge of that.
Yeah, so I was in charge of making sure all the shots were getting out the door at that point. And that in itself, you have a lot of pressure, because now you're not only dealing with your supervisors, you're dealing with the producer, you're dealing with the clients, you're dealing with every other coordinator who's reporting to you, because at that point, people are reporting to you to tell you when are you going to get things. Because then I have to do, my day always consists of like, all right, when am I going to get all these pieces? When, like, this is going to, like, I need to make sure in my schedule, like, I know I'm going to get these pieces this day, these pieces this day, and now I can tell the producer, who can tell the client that they're going to get it on X day. Wow. So I'm like, and then I'm the one who's supposed to tell, like, are we going to deliver the film on time? After Thor wrapped, we had the next big film for the studio right now, which is, we have multiple films going on, of course, at the studio at one time. But one of the big films that we're doing now is Avengers. And I was so, lucky and very fortunate enough that they wanted me to pretty much do TD comp, which is like, again, this prestigious position on a show this big. Because when you're, again, this show has, again, over 600 shots at the time right now. It's only going to get bigger. I'm dealing not only now with with San Francisco, but also our other studio sites. So we have a Lucasfilm that's in an island that's in London, and one that's in Singapore. And I'm dealing with both of those facilities too, making sure that they're getting their stuff done and sending it to me, so I can present it to the supervisor, who would then represent it to the client. So not only am I now focusing on, like, when I was on Thor, I was only focusing on San Francisco's work, but now that I'm like in this news position, I'm focusing not only on San Francisco, but also London, but also Singapore, and making sure all their work is getting done, funneling through me, show it to the VFX soup, who then presents it to the client. At the end of the day, the VFX supervisor is the one who knows what the client wants. So I have to make sure he's happy, the producers are happy, the other supervisors are happy, the client is happy, the directors are happy, because like with a studio like Marvel, you have to make sure that on their side that the director and the studio are happy, not just the director or not just the studio. You need to make sure everyone's happy. So sometimes it becomes very stressful, because there's so many layers to it. There's so many people you're trying to please. There's so many people you're trying to get the thumbs up from before it gets through. But at the end of the day, when you get all those thumbs up and I check all those boxes, it feels great. Like, there's days I work on, especially on Thor, and sometimes now on Avengers, I worked every weekend. And then a lot of the times they're like, okay, Anthony, you don't have to. I'm like, no, I have to come in, because if I don't come in, if something goes wrong, I put so much blame on myself. So, and I get that a lot. It's funny, I get that a lot from my mother, because my mother's the same way. So, it is just, you want to make sure you put your best foot forward, because I do want to keep growing with this company. This is an amazing company that can open any door for, like, pretty much, hopefully, when I graduate, not graduate, but if I ever decide to move on from here.
So when we look at the credits, how do you appear? What's your credit?
Right now, I'm going on as the lead production coordinator. My thesis film I did about my parents and about how they met and like the whole the Dominican culture in general was something that fascinated me growing up. Of course, because being Dominican myself, and their love story. So that's something I always wanted to do. I wanted to go into directing at least one film independently, or go into directing television for children. And so in the long run, like I always say, in the long run, I always want to direct. I want to make sure I at least go back to directing once, and then the ultimate goal, far in the future, would be going into education and teaching film to students and give them the same kind of opportunity and the same knowledge that I got, and be able to help and give back to like how people helped me.
Do you think, with the knowledge that you have and your experience in visual effects, do you think that we can make a decent film?
Oh God, yes.
Using
You can make
like a science fiction film, like a good science fiction film for like $1.5 million or even less.
Yes. Oh God, yes. You can. It's at that point you just need a strategic team, because when you're working with a budget, it's always about that they have that triangle: good, fast, and cheap, right? And you can only choose two of them. You can have it good and fast, but it won't be cheap. You can have it cheap and fast, but it won't be good.
Exactly.
Or you can, yeah. So it's like that whole process. You can choose two of them. So as long as you have the patience, the team, the mindset of going into it, like, hey, that was pretty much what I did in film school. That's pretty much what I kind of do now. I look at budgets. I say, okay, you know what? We only have X amount of dollars. How can we make this work? How can we make this work? And how can we get a profit out of this at the end of the day? So yes, there's been films done for $100,000. One thing I actually left out. I helped produce a film before leaving LA. I was producing this film that was like probably about 95% all visual effects, and we did that. We did that, and the film is currently still in the works. That's why I say it's going to be good, but because it's the time is not is we're being patient with it, and it's going to be cheap. So what you're giving up on that is the time it's going to take to come out, because it's not going to be fast, but it's going to be cheap, but it's going to take a while to get done. One thing I always took from my film school was the fact that they always say, make sure every visual effects has a purpose. Not just don't throw VFX in there. Don't throw visual effects in there just to have visual effects in there. Because then the one thing you don't want to do is like you're just shooting all this stuff and you shoot yourself in the foot at the end of the day, because it's not stuff you needed, but something that like outrageously you wanted.
Because in the end, you're killing the story, which is the main thing.
Yes, the most important thing is the story at the end of the day. I consider myself very lucky. How I kind of went over, I was a part of a lot of art programs. I went to the art school and even in film school. And a lot of the times, there are a lot of parents who don't necessarily believe that film, like not even film, but anything in the arts is not a real job. It's not something real. It's not something realistic, or it's not something that is actually, it's like, that you can make money off of. I'm trying to think of the right word on that. That it's just like one of those things that, it's a hobby more than an actual career.
It's not a normal profession according to most.
Yeah.
and whatever that means.
Yeah. And one thing I always loved about my parents, because from day one, and every time I switched, when I wanted to be an artist, when I wanted to be a painter, when I wanted to sing, when I wanted to dance, they were there. They went to every single one of my events, even if it was just me flipping on a light. They went to it. They, like, when I got into the film school, they not only did they show up, but they brought the whole like Hispanic clan to the premieres, where I had like 50 like loud Hispanics at the premiere in a theater, just waiting to see a 4-minute film done by me that was like crappily shot somewhere. Or like the fact that like my last film, I told my parents, I'm like, I did my last film based off my parents, and I needed a whole street full of Hispanics. My parents came with 2-3 vans filled with Spanish, like all my aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, friends, and they brought them all, like drove them an hour out of town just so they can be in my film. My parents have gone above and beyond what I think most parents would do. And honestly, like I do this, to this day, they have been there. They, no matter what, at the end of the day, they support my decision of what I want to do. So it's like they supported my decision moving to LA. They supported my decision even leaving LA and going to San Francisco. Even that was a risk. And the whole thing is that they always say like sometimes the risk is worth taking at that point. And it again, I can't imagine going through the journey without them because they are a big part of why I am. I push myself because I want to do right by them. They have given up and sacrificed a lot for not only me but my siblings, and a lot of what I do is wanting to give back to them for a lot of what they did for me.
That's great.
I say this: when I was a kid, my parents used to send me every summer to the Dominican Republic. So I quedé un par de tiempo a Baní y un par de tiempo en la capital, and so I always knew and I remember where I came from.
Okay. Un vanilejo en Lucasfilm, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Yeah.
Anthony, muchísimas gracias.
No problema.